Welcome everyone to this EUFORGEN webinar that is being organized in collaboration with the Mediterranean and the Biocities facilities of the European Forest Institute. There will be 5 different presentations, and then after each presentation, you will have the possibility of asking clarifying questions. But in any case, the main purpose of this webinar is to have a discussion afterwards all together. So please keep your remarks, your consideration for the debate that we will have afterwards. I would like, first of all, to introduce the speakers that we will speak in this order. First, we will have Magda Bou Dagher Kharrat, which is the principal scientist of the Mediterranean Facility of the European Forest Institute, and she is also a National Geographic explorer doing specific studies on Pinus pinea. Then we will have Bruno Fady. Bruno Fady is a scientist at INRAE in France, in Avignon, but he's also a visiting scientist here in the Mediterranean Facility. Giuseppe Scarascia is the head of the Biocities Facility of the European Forest Institute. And then we will have Maurizio Sabatti, that is the EUFORGEN coordinator for Italy. So then, please, Magda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michele. And I will share my screen. Can you see the full screen or
the wrong one? Oh, now we can see it. Now we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I would start with
how fast and
so if you are Mediterranean and you never did this, you should question yourself or your Mediterranean origins. So Pinus pinea is this tree that is characterizing the Mediterranean. So whenever we think about it, we think about the Mediterranean. It has different meaning, or people can relate to it differently according to where they are, from which region, in which country, and how they use it. And some countries, of course, dedicate to it even stamps. We can see many representation of Pinus pinea, as it's really a feature that is very beautiful in the landscape, especially when you have the sun behind. So it inspired a lot of poets and painters. Going back to botany, so Pinus pinea has this very specific shape, and very often the local name we give to it describe like a shape of umbrella or a stone, because the pine are hard. So all of this description in each country, in each region, sometimes you have a different description of Pinus pinea. Actually, it was described for the first time by Carl Linné himself in 1753 in species Plantarum, but then the genus and all the species of Pinus genus were described by another botanist, Lambert, where we can see a lot of synonyms. In fact, whenever people will encounter this kind of tree, they will name it. And you can see, if you look into the bibliography in the literature, a lot of synonyms under that are today known as Pinus pinea. And you can also, when you are looking in different herbarium around the world, you can see from different countries around the Mediterranean samples having sometimes different name and then corrected to be listed under Pinus pinea. So Pinus pinea, as we said, is a tree that has at the same time the male and female cones. When the fertilization happened, in fact, phenology is a little bit peculiar because pollination will happen in April, but real fertilization will happen 1.5 years later, or maybe more. So the cycle is very well described by colleagues in a paper where they really studied the phenology of the species, because it has very important role on the yield that the species will give, since we all know that what interests us mainly in Pinus pinea are the nuts. That this is why we call it sometimes the white gold of the Mediterranean. So in fact, these seeds, these very precious seeds, are hidden in different layers. So the first one is a kind of shell around the seed, but then you have all of these are on scales, and when the cone is closed, it's completely impossible for disseminator to have it. So when the pine are ready to be disseminated, normally they just fall down under the tree, and then they are dispersed by different type of dispersers like small rodents or type of birds. So, as you all know, this is a very important economic species, and this is why, like everything famous and important, it has a contrefaçon or competitors, and the main two ones are Chinese Pinus, that is Pinus koreanensis, and Pinus gerardiana, or Himalayan pine. And like the market is flooded by these, but it's not difficult to discriminate them, especially if you are knowledgeable in tasting these pines. So the shape is a little bit different, but the taste is different, and not only even the nutritive value of these seeds is different. And the Pinus pinea has the highest protein and all the nice oligoelements that you can find. As per geographical distribution, so this is extracted from EUFORGEN Atlas, and you see the actual distribution of the species in the Mediterranean region. We have like 0.7 million hectares, mainly in Spain, then Portugal, followed by Turkey and Italy, and all other countries have smaller areas. But we can find it also around in the Mediterranean climate, but not in the Mediterranean region, all around the world where we have Mediterranean climate. And since it's a very important species, we have prediction and modeling on its future distribution. And this is how you can see on this map how it will be more northern. It will have a more northern distribution, as you can see on these maps. So Pinus pinea is somehow a young species. It was differentiated from its ancestor around 5 million years ago. So 5 million years ago, our Mediterranean had already the shape we know for it today. But in between, we had many important events. So around this period, we have the onset of the Mediterranean climate, meaning we will have a dry summer and a wet winter and cold winter. But also we had in between the Messinian crisis that created some bridges between the different parts of the Mediterranean. So just bear in mind that all of these geological events, influenced the repartition, the distribution of this spine. But also the spine had to go through a different cycle of glaciation. And the last one that was the most important, the last glacial maximum, also influenced the distribution of these spines. Until today, we don't know exactly where, what is the exact origin of Pinus pinea. Is it to the east or to the west? We have different theories. None of them is confirmed yet. Bruno Fady will tell us more about it. What do we know? But all we know about Pinus pinea, our archaeological archives, are from macro remains. We don't use, as we do for other species, the pollen, because it's not a distinctive characteristic. We cannot distinguish different species of pine based on pollen. They look similar. While for macro remains, when we have the chance to recover some of these, they are really important and can indicate the real presence in one place. But we don't have to mix when we find these macro remains somewhere. We don't have to mix that they are originated from here, because they were really moved by humans since very, very long time. So very often you have some remains that are found outside the Mediterranean area, and just by comparing with a Roman Empire map, you can explain, for example, how comes we can find it in Britain or in the Netherlands or in Bulgaria. The oldest presence of Pinus pinea, to my knowledge, is not based, so here it's not based on archaeological remains. It's based on drawings that are found in a shelter in Alicante. And you can see here, and it's not very clear, but if you practice your eyes, you can see the very umbrella shape of this spine, and this early human is trying to get the cones down. So we have, I think, also another in here, the oldest than years. It's more in older presence of Pinus pinea. And then moving a little bit earlier in time about the symbols that these spines are showing. So very often it was associated to fertility or purification. So this one is from Assyrian representation, where very often we have this cone in many sculpture with this bucket, and normally it's associated to purification. Earlier also we can find it in many places represented, and behind every painting or every sculpture we have different representation for Pinus pinea. And this one is really nice to remember, because as you see, all of these guys represented here have this we call it the tortoise, and it has inside this apple of pine. And it was very often related, and today we can find it even in what the Pope of the Vatican are holding in their hand also. In my presentation, I will not go into detail, but just to show how it was assimilated over time. So it has a different, very important meaning for all the population, but with time, when the religious were changing somehow the culture, it was assimilated. So from a symbol of fertility and power, it also moved, for example, from a temple of Isis, and today, for example, this what you see here, which is the Fontana della Pina, is in the main basilica of the Vatican. So it was also now today, even in the Christian religion, it's associated also to fertility and to peace or to power. And we can find it here, for example, in the Black Virgin in Tibidabo in Barcelona. So over time, it has different significance, but some of them were practical, like for medicinal use, or even for as an aphrodisiac. And this one also from very early in Arabic
for the future. How does
represented? And in order not to take too much time, I will end my presentation here, just to tell you that what I presented now is part of a research we are doing for National Geographic with my colleagues Sarah and Maria, and supported by Yumna, and we are exploring Mediterranean trees and their relation to culture around the Mediterranean. We are working on olive, Pinus pinea, and caroube. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magda. Very nice and interesting overview. Now we will move to Bruno Fady, that she will dive us into the genetics of Pinus pinea, a very interesting and peculiar story. Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michele. Let me share my screen. I gather you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So yes, I will talk about genetics. And my message is actually very simple. If I had to make a 30-second presentation, I would say this, almost, in short letters. No genetic diversity in the very important letters. So the question is, as Magda also hinted, is that why is it like this? And I'll try to provide some answers. So if I were to tell it as a story through history, I think I would start in the early 1990s with the creation of a concerted sampling across the Mediterranean for the creation of common gardens. So this was done with colleagues using the Silva Mediterranean network on forest genetic resources. And we collected seed samples, actually were sent by the different countries, as you can see dots here in different colors, and they were shared among the countries that are represented here to constitute a certain number of common gardens. So in Portugal, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Spain, in France, and in Turkey. And there were also one started in Italy, but it didn't succeed, so I didn't put it on the map. So, and the numbers there are the number of common gardens that are found in those different countries. So that was the first step, and I'll tell you later about the results we got from those common gardens. But as was customary at that time, in the mid-1990s, we decided to also check the genetic diversity of those origins, those provenances, using molecular markers. And we started with the molecular markers that were used at that time in very high numbers in the Mediterranean. Isozymes. We also used terpenes, and we also used some secondary compounds, which proved all the same thing, was that there was no diversity. Actually, out of 31 loci that were investigated, which was pretty high at that time, we only found one was polymorphic, where usually we have about 50% that are polymorphic. No diversity, and with the only marker that was variable, we couldn't find any structure either between east, west, north, south, nothing, no structure. That was rather peculiar. And when we use secondary compounds, also we also didn't find anything except that the pine nuts were very rich in all kinds of health-related compounds that were good for eating. So that's the first hint, no diversity using those markers. Then there's a second study that came up in 2007. This time using more diverse markers. The ones at the time were chloroplast microsatellites. And again, very little diversity. So it was not a problem of markers. It was really a problem of, it was really something specific about that species, that apparently there was no diversity. And we could only found a few mutants, 4 in total, with 2 in Spain and 3 in Lebanon. So that doesn't give you many clues about how the species came about, why was there such a low diversity. And we started to speculate that as it is a very thermophilic species, probably it was reduced to very, very limited areas in the Mediterranean during the coldest time of the late glacial maximum, so 20,000 years ago, possibly just one population. And those mutants that we see now probably emerged afterwards. So that was the theory. So the only way to test that was to try to find a bit more diversity. And the story continues with a third range-wide study, this time in 2020, using the markers that were now available in the 2020s. Namely, nuclear microsatellites on the one hand, so this slide, and adaptive trait-related markers later on the next slide. So here we start to see a bit of something. Still, the diversity is very low. Heterozygosity of 11% is very low for conifers worldwide, but we can start to see some sort of, I would say, structure, with maybe some more green on the western front and some more red on the eastern front, with possibly the emergence of 2 different types, or possibly the existence of 2 different very limited populations during the late glacial maximum. But as you can see, there's a lot of admixture. The red and green are very often intermixed, and not just in the middle of the range in Italy or Tunisia, but also in Spain and in Lebanon. Only in Greece is there a lot of red, and mostly red. So the theory about having very small population highly impacted by climate change and cold weather actually took more hold by looking at those potentially adaptive genes. So these were resequenced from the genomic resources of Pinus taida, an American species. And we used 177 potentially adaptive genes, of which, again, low diversity, only 15 were variable, with only 21 mutants. Compare the same set of genes with Pinus pinaster, 548. So again, low diversity. And the explanation comes here with the two graphs that you can see on the right. So the B and the C. The B is for Pinus pinaster and C is for Pinus pinea. And the lines colored in dark black and red show the population size over time. So we start with some 100,000 years ago before the last, 400,000 years ago, sorry, before the last glaciation. And we travel through time from right to left. So from early in the Pleistocene to current time. And as you see for Pinus pinaster, every time there's a glaciation in blue, the population size of the species goes down, but each time there is an interglacial, it goes back up. That's the case for Pinus pinaster, but it's not the case for Pinus pinea. And you see that every time population size goes down, all the way down to almost very few individuals in terms of effective population size. So here we have a theory saying that glacial times across the Quaternary reduce significantly the population size of Pinus pinea, and possibly left only very few populations, possibly only even one, that later was able to recolonize all the Mediterranean basin. So that's the third study. There's a fourth one going on by colleagues in Madrid. This time with lots more genes, 5,000, lots more mutants, SNPs, showing up. So it's preliminary results showing up that there is some sort of structure, but not very easy to discover. And there's a lot of mixes, a lot of admixture again. And well, this is the new data set that we can use to try to make the theory with a bit better ground than we have right now. But if we go back to what we have, is also this. This is the map of where fossil remains were found, dated before the onset of the Roman Empire. And as you can see, they're all in the Western Mediterranean. In fact, if you look at fossil remains that dates to the late glacial maximum or before, they're all in caves in central Spain or coastal Spain. So the theory I can propose for now, based on what we have, is that actually there were only very few or possibly just one population left in Spain with no diversity, the diversity being completely erased by the last glacial maximum. And what happened for the recolonization of that species across time in the Mediterranean basin to reach its current distribution all around the Mediterranean was commerce. Commerce by starting with Phoenicians, Assyrians, Greeks, Romans. As Magda showed, pinyon pine nuts were a high-valued commodity, high health value, rich in proteins, rich in energy, and it was exchanged. There were sunken boats that were found with amphoras containing pinyon pine seeds. So with commerce that widespread, you can imagine that Phoenicians, for example, from the Near East coming to Spain, purchasing or exchanging seeds from Spain, taking them back to the Eastern Mediterranean, thus starting the new population where some of the variants were found. And then later with the Greeks and the Roman, pinyon pine nuts being spread to other countries to their current distribution. What does this leave us for this species in terms of adaptive traits? So I showed earlier that the first steps we took was to constitute common gardens. They are now something like 30 years old, and we did some measurements across time. This is a slide showing an average mean tree height from common gardens in France and in Spain. And the lines, the different colored lines, are values for provenances. And as you can see, there is no diversity almost for those values in terms of mean height. Among provenances, the trait line is very compressed. But if you go from least fertile to most fertile common gardens on the x-axis, you can see that size actually multiplies by 4. So this shows that there is no provenance diversity or very little. It explains less than 5% of the diversity, and most of the diversity that we see here is due to phenotypic plasticity, which explains over 80% of diversity. However, we know that there are some variable traits. For example, there were early studies in Italy in the 1980s finding some trees with soft shell nuts. And there are also studies in Spain showing that there is clonal differentiation for seed yield, leading to the constitution of clonal seed orchards for the production of pine nuts. A few pictures from French common gardens, and as you can see, in terms of architecture, branching, size, height, diameter, no diversity almost. So I would like to end my presentation by asking the question, what next? What next in the context of insect outbreaks, particularly the pine tortoise scale? That is the reason for this meeting today. The first question would be, is there enough diversity for adapting to this outbreak? Possibly, but perhaps not, as we have seen, there is very little diversity. And then the second question in terms of, I would say in the EUFORGEN context, and this is a EUFORGEN map of conservation units that you can see on the right. Are the genetic resources of pinyon pine sufficiently protected?
Some kilometers.
But perhaps also XC2 if we have to fight against insect outbreaks. So I would leave you with those two questions and stop my talk now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you for driving all of us through this very interesting and very peculiar genetic situation of the species. Before we move to the other two presentations, I would like to ask the people online if there are any questions, both for Magda or for Bruno. In case you have, please just raise your hand and you can just ask your question or type it in the chat if you feel more comfortable. Hoika, please, Hoika.
Thank you. This was both perfect. Thank you very much. I was just wondering, Bruno, if there is some archaeological remains from Istria, and in Life Systemic we have 3 plots with Pinus pinea from Croatia, one nearby Zadar, but it might be questionable, but the other one is on the island of Mljet. It's part of the national park, and it grows also in other parts of the big island of Mljet. How comes these were never included in your studies? Thank you.
Bruno, you're muted.
Yes, I realized that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Roga. The provenance trial I showed is the one that was a concerted action through Silva Mediterranea, where different people contributed to the same seed lots across different countries. So that's why I didn't mention. I'm sure, of course, there are other provenance tests that were done, but the ones that I mentioned are really, I think they're very valuable because they contain the same genetic material tested over very different types of habitats. Yeah, and in terms of remains, the ones that I showed is a publication dating 2011, so there might be more remains. What I think is most striking here is that although there are lots of pinyon pines in the Near East, and particularly in Turkey and Lebanon, there was never any remain found that was dated before antique commerce in the Mediterranean, which somehow tends to show that the only non-human made populations of Pinus pinea were actually in Spain when the Holocene started.
Thank you very much, Hoika. Thank you, Bruno. There is another question in the chat asking if there is any explanation for the low genetic diversity of Pinus pinea. Well, I will interpret saying that there were just because of different happening, very few individuals left, but maybe the question goes back to you, Bruno, please.
Yes, that's the answer. Actually, when you look at tree species across the world with large distributions, you find extremely few that have such low genetic diversity. I think it's actually the lowest one of the largely distributed species. You have ones that live on islands that have very low diversity, but that's explainable because of a bottleneck on an island. Here, perhaps it's the same explanation, and I think that's what it is. It's a bottleneck, not linked to geography, but linked to habitat, to having a habitat that was almost inexistent during the late glacial maximum, except perhaps in a place in Spain. So we'll probably know more with the ongoing study by Olson and colleagues from Madrid, but I suspect that's a pretty serious explanation. So genetic drift, extreme genetic drift due to very few individuals in a single population.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Then I would suggest that we move to the next part of the presentations, the next two presentations. The first one is from Giuseppe Scarascia Mugnozza that will present us a new scary challenge that the stone pine is facing in Italy. Please, Giuseppe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michele. Good afternoon to everybody. I hope you can see.
Yes, we can see very clearly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So basically, what I was asked to offer to you is some information about what is happening with the decline of Pinus pinea that up to now seems to be present mainly in Italy, even though there are some information that it is spreading probably also to France up to now. Anyway, just to reconnect to what Magda was saying about the role of Pinus pinea in the past and also in the present day, I would like mainly to underline the role of Pinus pinea in the history, but mainly in the landscape of the Mediterranean and particularly of Italy. So apparently it was introduced or anyway spread in central and southern Italy by Etruscan and Romans since already, let's say, antiquity time. But it is also fair to say that the role in the landscape, particularly of Italian regions and particularly around Rome, also in archaeological parks, as those that I show you. These are the images from Via Appia, so the old Roman highway going to the south and then to Greece. So basically, really, I mean, we should also mention that it was diffused also a few centuries ago, quite a lot around Rome, and it was basically a landscape that was created somehow, probably also with some information from the past, but it was created starting from the 1700 and the 1800, for instance, by archaeologists. There is an archaeologist who was for 40 years working in the Rome area, Antonio Munoz, and basically this type of landscape with pines and cypress along these archaeological highway and remnants can be traced back to that time and to that person mainly. Moreover, I can say that also the pine forests have been spread around, mainly planted, particularly starting from the 1700 along the coast of the Tyrrhenian Sea, mainly in the Rome area and in Tuscany. In 1700, there was basically a kind of resurgence of land reclamation efforts. And so this pine, but not just single trees, but entire forests, were basically implemented, created along the coast, mainly on sand dunes and in marshes area. Here we just see an old picture of 1547, so 16th century, of the Rome area. You can see the Tiber river. Basically, on the left now, just to give you an idea, there is now the airport, the international airport of Rome. But many of those forests are still there, and pine trees and pine forests have been planted on the sand dunes and also in marsh areas. So basically, particularly around Rome, we have constituted over time very magnificent type of Pinus pinea forest, like the one that you can see here, mainly for land reclamation, as I said. And just around Rome, there are, or it's better to say there were until a few years ago, more than 2,000 hectares of these stone pine forests. Just a few information from a, if you allow me, from a forest structure or a silvicultural structure point of view. In general, the pine stand structure was a even-aged forest, even though there are also examples of uneven-aged forest. But on this issue, the debate is still ongoing among silviculturalists. Anyway, there are different structures, also of different attractivity from a landscape point of view. Now, what happened just a few years ago? As many of you already know, but what happened is that an alien species, an alien insect species, so-called tortoise scale, Tumeiella parvicornis, arrived in Naples, most probably from Central America, probably arriving with some ornamental plants for nursery that were traded from Central America to Italy, to Europe. And so this scale immediately started to diffuse itself, and in few years, around 4 years later, it arrived to Rome, creating very large destruction. Here there is a picture of this scale, of these Tumeiella. These are adult females that, as you can see, resemble somehow a tortoise. And basically, they, with their sucking apparatus and the production of a lot of sugar type of, let's say, of substances that they produce, they favor the development of these fungi, creating sooty mold, so this blackish structure that basically diffuses on the needles and on the branches. And on the right, you can see an example of a crown of Pinus pinea that has less than 50% of the crown that is still green, relatively flashy green, and still with some vigor. But the most part of this crown looks and then of these sooty mold that basically cover the needles, and in a few seasons basically reduces and stop the photosynthesis of the needles. Here we can see another picture of the same adults, but covered with nymphs, so neonid, so young individuals, young individuals, if you, or instar also, that basically show the fact that these insects can produce many generations within 1 year, up to 3 or 4 generations. So for each generation, it needs something around 8 weeks. And these different generations can overlap. And this obviously determines a large number of insects that could attack the pines and that could also spread around. And this is basically the reason of this larger spread of the insect northward from Naples to Rome. Basically, this is how the tree looks like. The crown of the pine, of the Pinus pina, of the stone pine, looks like after some months of attack. Only few shoots remain green and more or less active in the upper part of the crown. Then the crown gets highly transparent, and it could be also observed from a close inspection to the crown, because this is important in order to organize the type of defense, the type of treatments in order to defend the pine trees. Only if about 50% of the crown is still alive, it is, let's say, reasonable and and possible to make the treatments. Otherwise, the treatment, as we will see shortly, is basically useless. And this is how many of the forests that are around Rome, actually, I would say most of them, most of the 2,000 hectares and more that are in famous forests like Castel Porziano, Castel Fusano, and so on, basically look like in this year, in 2023 and in 2024. So most of the crown are dead, just few are still alive. They are losing all the needles, and eventually they lose all the needles. They are completely dead, and there is basically no points in maintaining this type of forest, also because they can become really dangerous from a stability point of view. And so basically most of these forests are starting from last year and also this year, we are trying to take them down. It's not easy because we need authorization, because as you have seen, this pine forest used to have a very high landscape value, and so we need authorization from the landscape authority, and this is not something very easy. But I mean, there is basically no other things to be done, and so we are cutting them down. Here I want just to show you the very rapid, basically spread out of the Tumeiella, just in a small part of this reserve, Castel Porziano reserve, starting, that is basically between Rome and the sea. You can see that from August 2015, 2017, and then eventually in 2019, basically, these are NDVI information measurements from remote sensing, from satellite remote sensing. And so basically waiting for 3 years, the spread of the Tumeiella was very evident, and in 2-3 years, all these pine forests basically died, changing the color from green to red. Now the question is, what can can be done against this insect? Could we fight the insect or not? So first of all, I want to say that obviously some treatments can be done, but can be done just on single trees, on isolated, more or less isolated trees. To do this type of treatment in large and dense forests as those that I showed you is really unpractical, both from a cost point of view, but also because all these crowns are really intermixed, and so the insect can move very easily from one to the other. So basically, at least in the Rome area, now there is the obligation of fighting the insect either by cutting down the dead trees, or if trees are still alive, to treat them with there is just one insecticide that has been authorized in the last few years, abamectin, and basically a treatment that proved to be quite successful is the endotherapy. There are different ways to do this endotherapy. Here you can see just a different syringe with applying different type of pressure, and also holes of different sizes for the needle of the syringe. But basically, the results that have been collected in the last 3-4 years show that the treatment with abamectin could be quite successful, provided that the trees are basically isolated trees with large crowns and not completely, how can I say, not completely damaged. But of course, this treatment is costly. This treatment should be done very carefully with a lot of competence. Otherwise, you can get a counterproductive result. And the most important thing is that it should be basically repeated at least once every year or more. But the success is quite good because, basically the population after treatment, the population of the insect can go down, basically can almost disappear for at least 3 or 4 months throughout the summer season, and then probably the next year it should be repeated again. The other type of let's say of fighting against the insect could be utilizing natural predators. The fact is that there are no natural predators of these species in Italy or in the Mediterranean. Probably they can be found in the original area that is North America. And probably this is something, a kind of research that should be really developed. In the last 2 or 3 years in Italy, we tried, how can I say, predators that have been somehow derived from the agricultural sector, mainly from citrus orchards. And for instance, here we can see one of these predators that is basically trying to chase and to eat the young individuals, the nymph, the instar of the Tumeiella. This is a kind of coccinellide, a beetle, Cryptolemus montruseri. But it is also fair to say that this predator, as also other predators that have been basically derived from the agricultural sector, from citrus management, citrus orchard managements, are actually not really specific for Tumeiella, so they can look also after other types of insects. So there is something some interesting results, but it's not really decisive. Finally, I want just to conclude by saying that obviously we have also to somehow restore the landscape and the forest to start like mainly around the Rome area, mainly along the coast, and we are actually trying to make use and to capitalize on large urban forestation and peri-urban reforestation programs. And here are just some of the areas that have been, you can see, for instance, in the right, in the two right picture, these are areas that were previously covered by pine forest. They have been almost completely devastated, cut down. There are still some gray area or dark area that have to be cut down. And so in many of these areas, we are planning, starting already from this year, to restore forest. The question is what type of species to use. We are trying not to rely on the pine, but as Maurizio will show you, we are working also on this issue. Finally, let me just add that this type of problem, so restoring damaged forest ecosystem and forest landscape due to disturbance, due to alien species and so on, is something that more and more we will face with, as climate change will impact more and more on many different types of forests, not only in the Mediterranean. And so probably this is also a kind of interesting aspect from a scientific point of view. So to study the restoration also from an ecological and an ecosystem point of view. Here I just put down a few points, but I don't want to go on of it. It will just be, it can be just utilized for further and later discussion. And I just synthesized the points that I showed up to now. So, Michele, I think that I can stop here.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Really scary what you just presented. We have already a few questions in the chat, but I will encourage anyone else having questions to raise your hands while we go through the question that we have already listed. So the first one is about, well, I can reply this one myself, if the insect can attack other pine species. And yes, unfortunately, they can feed in nearly all pine species, and it was recorded for sure in Pinus sylvestris and few others. While the second, I don't know, Giuseppe, if you can reply to this one.
I add,
oh yes, sure.
Can I add just yes. It is a good question. It's right that this type of scale has been found also in Pinus sylvestris, Pinus laricio, Pinus mugo, and of course pines in North and Central America, like Pinus caribea, completely devastated. But at least there are some information that probably needs more research on that show, for instance, that some Mediterranean pines, particularly Aleppo pine, could be somehow more resistant or less susceptible. So this opens some opportunities for the future.
Thank you very much. Then the next question, if the cones, in the seeds of trees that have been treated with endotherapy can still be used for commercial uses, that can be still eaten?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't have a very clear explanation. What I can tell you is that the insecticide that basically moves up to the crown, basically its persistence is can be measured by only 2, maximum 3 months. So after 3 months, it seems to be to disappear. So this could be a partial answer to the question.
Thank you very much. Then we have a question from Santiago Gonzalez Martinez. Santi, please.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if there has been any observation on natural resistance in just that. I think it's one of the key questions. So
no, up to now, we have entomologists studying the response of the natural predators. Of course, obviously, you can imagine how they are interested in this type of issue, and also how they look with suspicion on insecticide treatments. But up to now, there have been no clear, let's say, evidence for that. But probably, I would suspect that we have also to work on predators from North and Central America, probably.
Thank you. Then another two questions that I think they go along together. One asking if the pine tree that are affected, they are in good health condition, or if they were already suffering, and then if there is any diversity in the way the trees are affected, or all trees are affected in the same way.
Okay, thank you very, very quickly. Of course, this opens a lot of different information also. I mean, distant from my competence, but some quick answer. First of all, what we observed in the Rome area is a kind of interactions between different insects, like for instance the Blastophagus, or called now Otomicus, so the bark beetle. I mean, somehow the Tumeiella weakens the tree, and then there are the attacks also by Tomicus that basically end and complete the work of Tumeiella. Or on the other side, there were already weakened trees by Tomicus that were completely attacked also by Tumeiella. So there is an interaction, particularly among these two insects. Tomicus is a local insect, of course, that attacks pines in the Mediterranean, and it interacts with these alien species. However, it is also fair to say that beside the chemical treatments, it was found basically from different observation, quite useful also to utilize more, how can I say, silvicultural type of applications and management, like for instance a kind of light pruning, the utilization of fertilization and particularly of biostimulants to improve the general condition of the tree. So somehow when you apply this endotherapeutic treatment, it is wiser to utilize also some of those silvicultural management.
Michele.
Yes, then just the last intervention, then we move, otherwise we will not be able to go through everything. Please, Bruno, go ahead, and then we move to Maurizio.
Yeah, to add to what Giuseppe was saying, in fact, the localization in France of that insect is on mostly trees in urban settings, and those trees are often the only ones around, so it makes an easy prey for the insects, and they're also very old. And in the forests that are next to those cities, the attacks are a lot less strong. Defoliation is a lot less strong, and it doesn't lead to mortality so far. I mean, it's newer in France than it is in Italy, near Rome, but still, that's the observations that we can make. So maybe yes, there is an interaction with the health status of the trees to begin with.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Then we move next to Maurizio, and then we will come back to all the questions and all the interactions later on. So please keep your question for later. Maurizio, I have to ask you, unfortunately, to be very brief in your presentation. Otherwise, we will not have time for the interaction later on. Please, the floor is yours. Sorry, I forgot to mention that Maurizio will present the current activities in Italy in trying to find some resistance or some way to cope with the situation. Please, Maurizio.
Okay. Thank you, Michele. So I will describe some recovery activities to cope the decline of the Pinus spina forest just in Castel Porziano. So Giuseppe has shown us the level of the problem. And also Bruno showed us which is the situation about the genetic diversity of Pinus spina as a species. Among these, the different points that show us that there is very little genetic variation, in the paper of Jaramillo Correa, and also Bruno is a co-author, there are some islands of genetic diversity within the genome of Pinus spina. And we hope to find there some adaptive quantitative genetic variation that it's due probably to methylation diversity with the bases that are not genetics or epigenetics, or there is some phenotypic plasticity. So we hope that there is, in this way, some genetic variability. Another point is that we don't know exactly in Italy which is the diversity, the genetic diversity. So Elia Vaiana and Andrea Piotti are running a Marie Curie project. The name is Med4At. And we are interested mainly to the objective one. That is to say, using the genotyping by before SNP chip and single primer enrichment technology, we hope to identify genes in Pinus spina that can help us to understand some gene-environment association, such as intraspecific local adaptation, and eventually also convergent local adaptation within Mediterranean pines. So for this reason, the project is searching for Pinus spina natural among brackets populations, as it is rather hard to know the origin of the material that is rarely documented. Up to now, 11 stands were sampled for 191 trees. There are included also 3 new candidate stands, and among these, we have included the Castel Porziano forest, or better, the remaining trees. And there is an ongoing DNA extraction for the bee forest SNP chip genotyping that will be finalized by July of this year. Also, we have to remember that the alien pests have an important social and economic impact. Pinus spina, during its bottleneck phases, might have been loss of specific parasites and diseases. And today it has comparatively few parasites and diseases. But we didn't consider in this sentence the alien pests. And among the alien pests, I have also an answer to a question that was done before, that about the corn production, we have an alien pest that is the western conifer seed bug, Leptoglossus occidentalis, that reduced the production of cones in many Mediterranean countries. So this is another aspect to take in account about the production of seeds of Pinus spina. Also, Giuseppe has shown us that the pine tortoise scale arrived in Italy in 2014 and in Rome in 2018. So we have proposed a project, Pinus spina recovery project. The nickname is ProPinea, to set up restoration strategy to secure the Italian stone pine in Castel Porziano for future generation. Obviously, not all the 600-700 hectares that were destroyed by Tumeiella will be reforested with this species. So the programs are to reforest mainly with oaks and other tree species. But at the moment, the strategy is to maintain Pinus pinea in some areas, such as gardens along roads within the Castel Porziano residential estate, by using endotherapy, as described by Giuseppe. Within this, another activity within the project is the genetic characterization of the population of Castel Porziano. We did the Med4Act project. Also, we have received Pinus pinea seeds from different populations of the native range. We began to ask for these seeds in 2023, and now seeds have been planted in the forest nursery in Castel Porziano, and the seeding is, the sowing is ongoing. Seedlings are monitored for their germination and tolerance to the Tumeiella infection. This will be done this year and next year. And we are thinking with the material that we will obtain to set up a comparative trial in Castel Porziano to test the tolerance of different provenances to the Tumeiella infection. And these are the population and the countries from which we received the seeds. We have the native range that is covered from Lebanon and Turkey in the eastern cluster. We have one population from Italy, northern Italy in Ravenna. And we have also three provenances, three populations from Spain and Portugal. And the seeds have been sowed. So you can see that for those planted in January, we have some good results from Turkey and Lebanon with 90, almost 98% of germination. And so we hope to grow this material, and there is some hope for. We don't think we will have fantastic results, but we hope to introduce some genetic variation and to evaluate a lower infection of the pine tortoise scale. Okay, this is the take-home message. So we hope that there will be local and international conservation efforts that will enable the necessary multidisciplinary research, data gathering and monitoring to develop and implement a restoration strategy for Pinus pinea in the area that has been attacked by this Tumeiella insect. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Maurizio. And yes, like you mentioned, is really a call for a joint action from, well, at least all the Mediterranean to see how we can face this new challenge. I will then now invite all of you to ask other questions or to start suggesting some possible initiatives, because as I was saying, this is a challenge. This is a challenge that is facing a species that is economically, ecologically, and also culturally very important for the whole Mediterranean. And this new insect, this new challenge that the species is facing, very likely will wipe out the species out of the entire landscape. Poika, please.
Thank you. I have a few questions. One was on specificity, not just on pines, but other species of this aphid. It's aphid, yeah? Then the second one is how exactly did it come to Naples, and how does it spread? How fast and with which? Because it seems that the adult females don't fly, if I'm correct. So how does it spread? And the last question, if it's so dangerous, how comes you didn't go and burn all these infected forests to start with?
Thank you very much, Hoika. I think all the questions go back to Giuseppe.
Okay, very quickly. First question, if it attacks, if I understood correctly, if it attacks also other pine species, yes, as it was said before. Many species in North and Central America, particularly Pinus caribea in the Caribbean islands, basically were completely destroyed. In Europe, as also Michele said, Pinus sylvestris, Pinus nigra, particularly Laricio, Pinus mugo, and it seems also Pinus pinaster. Pinus alepensis seems to be resistant. Of course, there are no, I think, clear studies on that, just observation, but it could be something useful or interesting for the future. How does it move? And I mean, how long does? I mean, how fast does it go? So. It seems that it arrived as the important is to take the ornamental material from nurseries from the Caribbean island. Probably it was overlooked by the phytosanitary system. We do not know. In any case, it was observed in 2014 in Naples. And then more or less in 4 years, it arrived in the southern part of Rome. And then it spread all around Rome to the north. I mean, Tuscany is, I mean, there are some observation, but it was not up to now, I mean, highly affected, but there are already some observations. How does it move? Because it is, I mean, the females do not fly. This is correct. But since they are very, very light, as you saw, the females, but particularly the males and the young individuals, they can be basically, they can move with the wind. We are used on cars, for instance. And in fact, it seems that most of the spread occurs along road, along highways. There is also some indication about the speed of this movement. Some kilometers, up to 10 kilometers per generation. And as there are up to 4 generations, or even more, 4 generations per year, you can basically get an estimate of what happened in 4 years between Naples and Rome. I mean, the distance is 200 kilometers, so probably some of them were even transported probably by different transportation system, probably cars or other type of structures and vehicles. So these are the information that you asked, I think. I don't know if I answered to all your questions.
Maybe Giuseppe, just one more clarification. It affects only Pinus, I mean the genus Pinus, or also other species?
There are no evidence about other species.
Thank you very much.
At least here in Italy.
Thank you very much. Santiago.
Yeah, I have. I don't know if it's a question of a comment or a point for discussion. So, but well, I think the some thoughts that comes to me thinking in piña is that there may be some natural resistance in the tree. I was talking when I made my question before. I was thinking in the tree, not in the insect. And then, but then as it's a species that have low genetic diversity and not a very clear population genetic structure, actually what could be needed will be not so much to search for the resistance across the distribution of the species, but we will need to process many individuals, because the level at which resistance will be found could be more at the individual level. And in that sense, the good news is that it's easy to graph Pinea, so it's a species that can, once these trees are identified, it will be easy to move them to the C2 collection and start doing crosses and breeding for improve this resistance. But the very first step would be to, in my opinion, to do organized survey where these tolerance trees can be identified, and maybe one way, I like the initiative of Maurizio that they put it then in a nursery and testing seedlings may work, but it would take time. But I wonder if just like by doing surveys of natural forests that are affected by the pest, would be enough to do a first selection of trees to start like breeding this resistance. So.
Thank you very much, Santi. Yes, really an important reflection. Please,
If
Giuseppe.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, to work on single trees, it could be useful and also practical from what you said. That's perfectly correct. We did some search for tree resistant, but I mean, it didn't provide us with a very good information. Also because I mean, the spread of the attack was still ongoing. But I think that this is also something that that now we should look for. Of course, this should be organized in a proper way, probably by drones. Now it could be something that could be done, because I mean we are talking about thousands of hectares. Then I remember that there was also another question by Oikas. Sorry, I didn't answer. You said why it was not burnt immediately. Yes, that's a good question or observation. But I have to tell you that all of these occurred very, very quickly, just in 4 or 5 years. We started, as I said, asking for authorization to cut, because of course also the population was very much, I mean, was paying a lot of attention to all of this. This is a very sensitive issue. And basically the fall down of the mortality, I mean, it occurred really only to what is happening, because we had signs of the attacks, but really the final, how can I say, solution arrived just in the last 2 years. In any case, when the crowns are dead, I mean, there is no problems with spreading of the tortoise, because they are killed too. The problem at that point will be the blastophagus, I mean the bark beetle that attacks also weakened trees and starts from weakened trees. So I mean, burning is not really important. The important is to take down these trees, and we can utilize them we are utilizing this material as chips for that oblige the biomass energy plant, so somehow burning too, or also for instance, for structural material, no? Like plywood and so on, like boards. Because we have noticed that, I mean, when the material is dead and dried, there is no danger. In any case, the phytotherapic service is looking very closely to what is happening. There are regulations, there are decrees emitted by the Ministry of Agriculture that oblige the private and the public owner for fighting these insects.
Thank you very much, Santi. Thank you very much, Giuseppe. There are a couple of questions that looks more into the conservation side. Well, for example, I'll pick one that is looking at what are the possibilities for storing the seeds in gene bags, for example, for how many months or year can be stored, and if this can be a possibility for safeguarding the germplasm for some years before we find the solution, or what are the other possibilities that we have?
I think that Maurizio can answer to this, or Bruno, I don't know.
I know, Maurizio, you mentioned that you tried to store and you have evidence of very low vitality of the seeds after.
We received the seeds collected from 1 or 2 years, and they germinated very low level, so 10% of germination. So the conservation is very, very difficult, as these seeds are not orthodox seeds. So I don't know if there are effective methods to preserve them for a long time.
So basically the only possibility...
Under vacuum, yeah. Under vacuum and at low temperature. I don't know if there are experience. Maybe Bruno know more.
Yeah, we have seeds so those seeds that were collected around 1992, 1993, they now have a very low germination capacity, but there's some of them still germinate. You can dehydrate them and store them in -20. That would work, but
looking at what are the possibilities.
Germination capacity over time, a lot more than you would with Aleppo pine seeds or black pine seeds. So you can, other solutions like what Santi mentioned, you can graft them and put them somewhere else in a place where the insect is not present. Again, I think what we also need to do right now is monitoring, because it's unclear whether in instances where you have city parks or high density populations like the one you were describing near Rome, would that spread very efficiently and completely to natural populations where density may be lower, trees may be younger, some sort of silviculture would be applied, stress would be lower. Those are things we don't really know. So I would suggest monitoring. And again, yeah, whenever there's a tree that seems to be resistant in an area where there's a lot of insects, then graft it and keep it somewhere, and then use it for analyzing of its genome later on. So I think ex situ conservation in the form of grafts would be a better solution. And then, of course, that doesn't exclude in situ conservation in other areas where we, again, I'm repeating myself, but monitoring seems to be very important to do. So that would be things that I'm thinking about.
Thank you very much, Bruno and Maurizio. If there are any other questions concerning the conservation possibility on what to do next or some intervention, please feel free to raise your hands and I will give you the floor. While I will now go back to some questions more related to the fight against the pathogen. I have Gunnar Isaacson that was asking something specific about other possible insects that you could use in the fight. If I can ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question directly, otherwise I'll read.
Yes, I can ask a question.
Thank you very much.
I know in large parts of Europe we have Antribide species, Antribus nebulosus, And this beetle have their larvae feeding in the scale of the female of scale insects, and they can feed on many different species of them too. And we have observed them on an outbreak that we had on spruce in the very south of Sweden in 2010. And I don't know if it was because of these antribus species, but the scale insect disappeared in 2-3 years. And it was a very strange outbreak because this specific scale insect, Physocermes inopinatus, was before only known from Southeast Europe, Hungary, and former Yugoslavia, and that part of and Greece also. And then it suddenly came in Sweden and made a lot of damage. So my question is, have you observed this Antribus nebulosus, also called Brachytarsus nebulosus, in Italy? I would guess you have it, but have you observed it in connection to these pines?
Thank you very much. I don't know if, yes, Giuseppe?
Well, it is difficult for me to answer. My very simple answer is I don't know, but what I can say is that the monitoring that was proposed by Bruno is very much going on, because we are closely controlling. I mean, the entomologists working with us are closely monitoring the situation with these, within this pine forest. Up to now, they did not observe any natural predators. As I mentioned, we tried also in the last 2-3 years to utilize predators that were somehow derived from agriculture, but they did not really give. They gave some interesting results, but not really decisive one. Because why? Because they are feeding on different insects, and so if there is one population that is going down, for instance, of this scale, they can feed on other insects. So we have to look for something more specific. But up to now, we did not find this type of species. But of course, monitoring is something very, very, absolutely very important, because more and more we will observe due to the change of climate and due to the global change, so the movement of animals and plant species, we will more and more observe this type of disturbances for our forestry species. So really, let's say a cooperative effort is absolutely needed.
Thank you very much. Then we have the next one is an intervention from Pietro Piusi. Please, Pietro. You are still muted. We cannot hear you. While you fix.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Thank you. The question is mostly for Giuseppe. Since it takes 4 years only to reach to Napoli to Rome, I'm wondering, since 2018, when it came to Rome, how much has been spreading north? Because I'm living in Firenze. I know what's happening on the coast, and even Frecciarossa has a bad reputation, but should be already in southern Tuscany. Do you know anything that is north of Rome? Did you monitor the diffusion of the parasite? Thank you.
Thank you. The connection was not very good, but if I understood correctly, is about the speed. How can it be that it was so fast between Naples and Rome, and why it's so slow now from Rome going northwards? Is this correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, back to Giuseppe.
Again, that's a good observation, but I mean, I have no answer. Probably, I mean, one explanation is that in Rome there is a very large population, and so the attack was very heavy. But then moving northward, probably, I mean, the connection, probably the if I can say, the ecological corridors probably are not so continuous, because we have this type of pine forest basically in Civitavecchia or around Civitavecchia. There are some of these pine forests from plantation, but north of Rome, I mean, there are really no more population north of Fiumicino. So probably the movement has been somehow slowed down. But I know that the regional, the Tuscany regional authorities, forest authorities, are very much scared, and so they look very, very closely. And I mean, some evidence, some observation have already been done, but no major, let's say, spread, and no major damages have occurred. But I have also to say that even north of Rome, some of mainly gardens and parks, there have been a lot of treatments, and so somehow this probably has slowed down somehow the movement of these species north of Rome. Probably there is also this other aspect, because treatments is obligatory since 3 years in Rome, in the Rome area. All the public parks have been treated several times, and also the private gardens, I mean, are obliged. Obviously, not all of them are conducting these treatments, but many of them. So now we are very, very careful in the Rome area. Probably this has somehow influenced the reduction of the speed, but I mean, this probably is also an optimistic view.
Thank you very much. Then, Giuseppe, you mentioned the importance of having international collaboration on this matter, and there is a question specifically going in this direction, asking if there is any research group or any authority that is collecting the information of where new, when there are new trees affected, where the insect is recorded, or where we can, or people that find the insect can.
Okay, what I can say is that in the Rome area, so all the region around Rome, also north of Rome, there are colleagues of mine that are detecting, particularly utilizing also remote sensing. So a lot of research is being conducted, and also this research is being conducted in as a joint effort between Tuscany, so the Florence region, and Rome. So, I mean, but this is not international cooperation, this is mainly national cooperation, but really there are many groups that are working from this point of view. So entomologists, silviculturalists, specialists in remote sensing, and so on. But of course, this probably could be a model to be developed also in other countries. Maybe we can propose something to the European Union. I don't know. This is just a possibility.
Thank you very much. And then the question that I think goes more to Maurizio, if the insect is recorded only in adults or also in young seedling, and this will relate to how much is likely that the nursery will be a vector to propagate the infection as well, if you have already recorded any infection in the seedlings.
No, in the nursery in Castel Porziano, there were not seedlings of Pinus pinea. What we have observed directly in the field is that the young plants were much more attacked at the beginning than the old one. So they died almost immediately. So there were some trees that were 10, 15 years old. They were severely attacked by the insect, much more than the adult trees.
Thank you very
This
much.
is an observation.
Thank you.
If
Bruno.
I may say, in France, the insect has been detected a few years ago in the region of Saint-Tropez on the French Riviera, and the explanation for the arrival of the insect is trade. It's trade in seedlings, in potted plants. So that would confirm that actually, yes, the insect can develop on small plants, can develop in nursery settings, and that international trade or long-distance trade is a very likely vector for this insect. And after the arrival by those potted plants, then the trade was severely reduced, and the spread is slow, as slow as you mentioned around Rome. So yeah, commerce, seedling trade is something that should be watched, and probably the plant should be put on a quarantine list.
Thank you very much. Well, especially because it can affect not only Pinus pinea, but also other species, then it will really means that many seedling for many species can be a way to move it. Bruno, I will have another question for you. You mentioned that in France there are already protocols, because I've received a few questions concerning what are the best protocols to follow. And if I'm not mistaken, France has already in place a protocol what it should be done when the insect is detected.
I think it's the same endophytic protocol as is used in Italy. The molecule is made by Syngenta. It's been approved. It's sold under the name Revive, and the active molecule is emamectin benzoate. So I don't know if it's the same one as in Italy, but it's been approved since 2023. It's authorized for trees that are in parks and gardens, and it's by injection. So I suppose it's the same.
But there are also other practices like insulating the trees or having, or simply when it's detected, this is the only thing you can do.
Yeah, that's the only thing you can do in the parks and garden setting, but it's not obligatory as was mentioned. It's a treatment. For now, it's you can do it. You're authorized to do it if you want to do it, but it hasn't yet been approved by the Ministry of Agriculture. It should soon. So I think we're behind in terms of using this treatment. We're behind what is done in Italy. And then, if I may, I also had a question that I wrote in the chat, but since I have the floor, this endophytic treatment by this molecule or another one, I suppose it also kills all the other insects that feed on the tree, or the predators that might eat the scale, right?
Giuseppe, you're muted.
Yes, Bruno, first of all, yes, the principle, the active principle is abamectin, as you mentioned. The commercial name in Italy is different, is Vargas, but in any case, we have, I mean, the authorities have checked also other type of compounds, but the only one authorized up to now is what you already mentioned, is abamectin, that is being utilized in Italy at least since 4 or 5 years, and it is obligatory in the last, if I'm not wrong, 3 years. Yes, second question. Yes, of course, that's the problem. It can affect also the other species, and this is why I mean, there is this search going on for natural predator, and many of the entomologists, colleague of mine, are a little bit, how can I say, skeptic about the insecticide treatment, but really there is nothing to do if you want at least to save in urban settings and somehow peri-urban settings, mainly along streets. If you want to save these trees, that's the only way. But I can also say that with 2,000 hectares of pine, Pinus pinea forest, I mean, if there are natural predators, they can thrive too, because as I said, we treated something like, I think, something like 40, 50,000 trees inside Rome, but on 2,000 hectares, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of trees I mean, not really natural population, because most of them were planted, but I mean on large population at the forest scale. And so, I mean, we could not treat this type of trees. We treated mainly single trees along streets, along highways, and in private and public gardens and urban parks. So, I mean, if natural predators will come out, I mean, they have a lot of other surfaces and forest surfaces where to thrive and to develop.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Magda.
Yeah, thank you, Michele. I'm hearing all what's been said, and I'm really wondering who is responsible of putting in place a surveillance scheme. I mean, normally in this kind of case, we know that it can be very harsh, and it's a economically very important species. So instead of having each country struggling alone or just communicating between researchers as we are doing today, I mean, who would be the most effective authority to have the lead and organize a very in-depth surveillance in all the Mediterranean country to catch it whenever it starts? I mean, I'm just questioning. I'm not a specialist of phytosanitary for the forest, but I mean, I feel really the urgency to ask this question.
I can start, and the other colleagues can complement. I will say that for sure the European Plant Protection Organization will be the first authority, the first authority to either. I hope they're already aware, but maybe this is an initiative that as European Secretary we could take in approaching them, but also at the level of the European Commission, a Directorate General DG Sante responsible for safety in general, customer safety and also plant safety. They have their own under their mandate. They have responsibility.
So I think XC2.
I don't know if someone want to complement.
Well, I mean, I can just say, for instance, that also the EFSA agency probably can have also something to say. The other thing would be within Forest Europe or within the committee of the general directors of I mean of forestry from the different ministries in the different countries, probably also there somehow should be, how can I say, solicited, and a kind of action could be promoted. But Magda, if you allow me, knowing also, I mean, how not very quick sometimes are the bureaucratic authorities, also because they have a lot of different, how can I say, pressure to respond. My personal opinion is that we should have at least a two-layer type of response. One should be, bottom up, so from the scientific world, really taking some, for instance, some action, like proposing some research project or something like that. It should be as comprehensive as it could be, because we have seen that there are genetic aspects, forest aspect, entomology, no? So from different points of view. And then, of course, for instance, you from the EFI Med, you can try also to promote a response also at the institutional level. But I would really recommend to have at least two different type of responses. One is a scientific one that probably cannot have such how can I say, such an impact like the institutional one, but at least we can provide a lot of information, and also we can move in a more voluntary way, probably also much faster. So at least we should try to work at two different tiers, at two different levels.
Yeah. Going back to, I mean, since it's a very well-known tree that cannot be mistaken with any other tree, and it's present everywhere in urban setting, so maybe a social, how we call it, you know, social, how we call it?
Social effect, social impact, I don't know, social movement,
social science.
Social science, yeah, I mean, kind of like just to, people can just say what are observing, etc. If we define a protocol, how to identify it exactly, and what can be done, like something kind of a web of surveillance everywhere around the Mediterranean can be set up and can somehow permit monitoring the progress or devastation.
Sure, that could be a good idea. I can tell you that, for instance, there is a lot of interest in Italy and in Rome, and unfortunately, I mean, if you base yourself just on the social participation, there could be really contrasting somehow proposals. Some want to conserve everything, other people want to cut everything. So really, this is a very sensitive issue, but also we have to be careful to, I mean, to inform correctly the population. This is also something important that I think we should be done.
Thank you very much. Tur. And then we move to the last round of concluding remarks from all the speakers. Please, Tur.
Thank you. I'll try to make it quick. I was wondering, do we know anything about the climatic limits of this insect and how that, and also, I mean, if you put that on the map of the distribution of stone pine, are there any indications that within the present distribution there is some parts which will not be overlapped and it will be secure, or is it too early? Thank you.
Thank you, Tur. Anyone can reply? Giuseppe, you're muted.
From the observation that were conducted, I wouldn't say in a very scientific approach, but I mean, observation that were conducted within our urban setting and so on, tell us that there are basically two contrasting weather or climatic events. Obviously, very rainy and cold season, they could somehow reduce the population, and therefore also the impact. So in years when it rained, quite a lot, obviously, we are always talking about Mediterranean conditions, that is something that negatively affect the population. On the other hand, this is a species that, of course, loves, let's say, warmer temperature, but not very high. Above 35, 40 degrees, again, there is a kind of limit for this population. So the activity of this insect goes down. So basically, we can locate the optimal condition between 15, 20 degrees up to 35, okay? And if it rains a lot, or if it is really dry, these are also conditions that somehow could limit. But of course, in this range, I mean, they can thrive quite a lot in the Mediterranean area. But again, probably more research and observation are needed also from this point of view.
On the European Plant Protection Organization website, they list states in North America where the insect is present, and it states like, I mean, going north this time, like Wisconsin, New York, so states that are quite north. So I suppose if Tor, your question is, can it move north to Scandinavia? Probably.
But there are no Pinus spinae.
Well, it would be in America, in North
Yeah.
America,
Scott
those
pine.
it's like Banksiana or those pines
Yeah,
that
yeah.
are present in those states. So
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going towards an end, so I will just have the last round of concluding remarks. Maurizio, we can start from you. Do you have any concluding remarks to share with the participants of the webinars? You're muted, Maurizio.
Sorry, as I wrote in the take-home message, we should need collaboration with more experts such as entomologists, silviculturists, and so on. And we hope also to share protocols to set up the monitoring, because the monitoring will be very important. I have to add that I spoke with a colleague of mine in Portici last week, and he told me that entomologists are searching for trees that are tolerant by evaluating the level of infection that is below 40% on the crown of the tree. So they have found something of similar. Obviously, we have to improve this kind of observations, because can depend by the climate, by the local conditions, and so on. So the take-home message is this one.
Thank you very much, Maurizio. Bruno.
I would say two things. One about citizen science. The way it is done in France for looking for this insect on Pinea is to look at what the technicians doing it called fumagine. It's this black matter that's covering the branches. So that's pretty easy to spot. So that could be one way to try to detect where it's present. Second thing is we have quite a wealth of provenance, progeny, and clonal tests, either using common provenances or material that's specific to countries. And I guess those should be used also not just for measuring height adaptation and cone yield, but also to look for differences in resistance to pathogens, obviously. And I'm very happy also to see that the European projects are finally able to include Pinea in their species, particularly projects that work on genomics. So that's good news, and I hope it continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Giuseppe. Some final take-home messages.
I mean, we have said so many things. What I can just add is basically that really this is a very good opportunity to work all together, at least from a scientific and research point of view. And since this species has also, beside other aspects, also a very strong landscape value, probably we can also try to, how can I say, to tap on the on some other programs, like for instance, the new European Bauhaus that looks also at the landscape, at the attractivity of the landscape, and so on. So we can add different aspects to work on. And then the restoration project, that is a wider issue, but I think that really in the coming years, we as silviculturists have to work quite a lot also on this aspect. Adaptive management and restoration programs that look at the at various ecological aspects, at various ecological point of view.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Magda?
Very fast. So again, I will highlight the importance of collaboration, of quick action, and maybe why not organizing a specific meeting and conference where we can really gather all what a very extraordinary meeting just for Pinus pinea for this problem, to get more in depth and see what we can do to gather faster and act faster, and maybe have kind of a white paper or something really to bring it to high level, to manage to have funding and organize something specific very quickly.
Thank you very much, Magda. As EUFORGEN, we are committed to the conservation of the genetic diversity of the species, and we will take any possible measures to, well, first of all, disseminate the knowledge that we are gathering on this new threat, and then to coordinate conservation activities. The recording of this webinar will be made available shortly after, well, either today or in the next few days, and then it will also be used to disseminate and to raise awareness on this threat. Having said so, I would like to thank all the participants for the time and for the input to this specific. And I thank you all very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michele.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.